This episode of Archispeak is brought to you by Arcat, and they want to know if you're visiting Chicago for Green Build in November. If you are, check out Arcat at booth 529. This year's theme for the Green Build Convention is Human by Nature, focusing on sustainable buildings and practices that are accessible to everyone.
Did you know that you can use Arcat to find lead data on building products? Arcat's powerful search engine can help you find the product information you need that meets your environmental standards. Best of all, it's free.
Check out arcat.com, that's ARCAT.com today, and visit them at Greenbuild November 14th and 15th at booth 529 for more information.
This episode of Archispeak is also sponsored by Hager Co. Hager Companies is focused on innovative products, resulting in the only U.S.-based provider offering a full line of door hardware. Along with their quality products and outstanding customer service, Hager provides complimentary architectural hardware consulting services and numerous AIA and CES registered continuing education courses.
Hager Companies will be exhibiting at the Texas Society of Architects Design Expo on November 8th and 9th in Fort Worth, Texas. Please stop by booth 142 and say hello and learn more about all of their door hardware products, including their electronic access control line, Hager powered by Salto.
Welcome to Archispeak, the podcast that talks about what it's like to work in the profession of architecture.
Welcome to episode 154 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
All right, so this episode, we just keep getting some great emails here. So this one caught our eyes, and we got a message from Hyla, and she asks some pretty interesting questions. And one of the reasons this stuck out to me was because this is something that I really wasn't aware of until after I graduated from architecture school. And it came from a perspective of somebody that I work with now. And I was kind of enlightened when I heard this. And it makes sense. I'm sure lots of people already knew this. So I'm a little slow on the uptake here. But I'll read the email. And I'd like to hear what you guys think too. Definitely, because I think that this is something that a lot of students struggle with. And I think that this applies to people who are in the field of architecture after graduation too. So I think it applies to students, but it doesn't just stop there, I guess is where I would go with that. So she's an avid listener, has in her third year of the architecture program and is struggling with instructor feedback on a project. She says, I learned about very conventional construction techniques in school where she lives. It's all concrete, and I'm designing a sustainable building for her final project. She's done all the research about sustainable architecture alone, as that information wasn't covered in their curriculum, and finds that she's butting heads with some instructors when she comes in for critique. So she says, I feel like they don't understand what I'm trying to do and maybe don't know enough about this subject, but they keep trying to push me toward using more conventional construction methods. I find it extremely frustrating since I need them to sign off on the project in the end, and I feel limited in my decisions because of that. So here's the question. She says, would you say it's worth it to compromise on some things that she wants to do in order to complete the project? Or should she be more stubborn and do her best to defend the research that she's done, even though it's completely self-taught and maybe incorrect? Cormac, I heard an audible groan. What are you thinking?
Well, it's just I don't know. It's a hard one. I'm going to let you dive in, seeing how you were talking about you've got personal experience with a friend at work, but I don't know. The audible groan was more of like the completely self-taught and incorrect one. So I'll reserve judgment for the conversation.
So the thing that I think really strikes me about higher education is that it's something you're paying for the most part.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, I'm kind of generalizing, but that is at least in the U.S., that is pretty much how it goes. And so it's on your dime. And I'm just going to assume that that's the situation here too, although I don't really know if it is or not. But let's just assume that it is. So the interesting thing about that was, and this was the epiphany for me, was that you get to call some of the shots. And that even goes for your major when it comes to the research that you're doing for your thesis project or your project, your design project. She says she's a third year student, so maybe this isn't like a senior project or anything. But I think that this is probably an advantage that more graduate students have more than undergraduate students have, because you're definitely, you already have some experience. Maybe you've already got another degree. You already kind of know how the system works. And so you have some educational experience when it comes to how to work within the bounds of the system that's set up. And I think that there's a little bit more ownership at that level over what's going on, because you're probably balancing even a career at that point with school. So you kind of know what you're capable of and what you can and can't do. I think that's a little different for undergraduate students. My experience was going into university straight out of high school, and so I really didn't feel like it was that different. It was definitely harder, but it wasn't something where I felt like I had much control over it. And I kind of wish that I did, and I think that things would be much different now if I were to go back. I mean, obviously now with the experience I have, but if I would have known even that much more when I was in my undergraduate program, I would have thought about it quite a bit differently. And that's not to say that I was totally naive. Like, there was definitely times where I was working on projects and the requirements were such, and I didn't necessarily follow all those requirements to finish the project. It wasn't like the instructor was necessarily even checking off that you met all the requirements. It was kind of like, did you make a convincing argument, and did you show the right amount of work to tell the story that you wanted to tell in front of the jury? But that's what I started to think about when I'm thinking about her question, because she's saying, is it worth it to compromise on some of the things that she wants to do in order to complete the project? And again, like I kind of frame this with, you're paying for this education. What do you want to get out of it?
Yeah.
And I also think that it's just a grade, and that does not define you.
Right. Interesting. You're talking about, you went from, high school into college, and we know that I went from high school to the Army to college to then, out of college, working for a little while, then back into college. And so I like this, some of your comments and kind of her frustration here with one that I had is, so after I got out of the Army, and, I knew that I was paying for this, and that this was, I would demand as much out of them as I wanted to, the professors, because, this is not just my education, but it's also my money. And I remember, and I had received A's in every single one of my studios up until this one particular professor. And I had this professor, and I think I might have told this story a while back, but he had, he came in first day and kind of set the tone for everybody. It's just like, I know that you guys, have been earning A's and stuff, and I don't give A's. I don't, it's just, I don't feel like, anybody is going to do A deserving work. So, just understand that you're not going to have an A.
Really?
Oh, no. And I yelled out, I yelled out. I was just like, excuse me, who's paying who?
Wow.
Exactly. And I kind of got very confrontational. Well, end of the story was that I got a B, because that's all he gave. You
didn't get your A.
I didn't get my A because, I probably, after I, started to confront him, and it was, what was interesting about his particular studios, I became more confrontational with him throughout the entire process than I had been before, which then, kind of like, in a way, altered the way that I, went from there on out, and it kind of somewhat changed the way I am in the career. Is just like, I'm not going to stand by and, let them, just butt heads with me just because, they want to set the tone of like, I'm the authority, you listen to me kind of thing. Because, whether or not they're an expert or in in this case, where they seem to not know anything about like the sustainability side of what she's trying to do here, you get to, it's like I tell everybody, and just recently told somebody in their performance review, you make your own career. Well, in school, you sort of make your own, path through school. And since we're going toward, not going towards, we've been, knee deep in sustainability, and this should be something that should be almost second nature in education now. So it's kind of it seems weird to me that she's having to be self-taught on something that should be second nature in education. Well, architectural education.
How about being encouraged, right, to explore? I mean, I when I was in school, one professor I can think of off the top of my head, she would come around and kind of do a survey of what everybody was working on. And then she'd disappear for a little while, and she'd actually go down to the library and pull slides about things that were relevant to what everybody was doing, and that we could all relate to and use for either inspiration or discussion. And then at the end of studio, she'd come back and she'd go through some of these slides and work with us. So the point here is that it's disappointing to see that sort of openness in her studio is not happening, right? That's it's kind of disappointing that that's the case. I don't know. I mean, I see where you guys are going with this. We're paying for this school, and they should be working for us. And I get that. But in this situation, it's disappointing that she's not able to get that encouragement to go pursue perhaps a different construction method. But I would also say, though, that the type of construction she mentions in her email is more with concrete, right? That's the type they have now. And I guess where I was going to take a short detour on this was that when you're in school, it's also an opportunity you got to learn the basics, right? And so if concrete is what's typically used there, and I'm making an assumption here, but it's not a bad thing to learn how to work with that material that and the standard construction methods of the area you live in. Okay. If you've got that down and you can understand that, then you can start to branch off and try and do different things as well, right? So maybe, we always talk about having that level of experience, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see where I'm going with that? So if you get that level, that base of understanding, no pun intended, the base, the foundation, if you will, of how you work with the materials that are typical in your part of the world, then you can branch out and then start looking at, well, how do I make that more sustainable? We can get back over to this, but one opportunity here is, how do you make concrete more sustainable, right? There's a lot of things we do here to help make it more efficient and energy efficient and such. So maybe that's a way to maybe even spin what you're trying or what she's trying to do, but use it in the types of materials that are more common to that part of the world.
Yeah, because I mean, I was honestly of two minds in this, because always playing the devil's advocate. I mean, I can honestly argue for her, kind of like dig in her heels and fight for kind of like the direction that she's been working on and kind of teaching herself how to do all of these things, or the other tact is, okay, well, how do you kind of play ball, do the more conventional methods, but in something, in a construction method that is prevalent everywhere, really. I mean, sure. Here's a guy that is currently working on the design of a building that in downtown Baltimore, the construction method for these high-rise buildings that we're doing around here is concrete. guess who's doing one of the first steel buildings that Baltimore high-rises have seen in a very long time. Because of the, different, kind of constraints that I have on my project, it just seemed more natural and worked better to change to steel. So I'm kind of bucking the system. So, I can make arguments in two different fashions, but where I was going with that is like in concrete. You're right, Neil. There are ways of making concrete, through different admixtures and things like that, more sustainable. But, then you can also make the argument on the sustainability factor with, the life cycle of concrete, the maintenance-free, aspect of certain things, the inherent durability and fireproofing of, concrete versus steel and all this other stuff. I mean, because... So if I were to make the argument for, say, okay, well, why would I do, if I'm doing like a high-rise building or something, why would I do it out of concrete rather than steel? It's like, okay, well, if, the cost of raw materials and labor are virtually the same, what makes one inherently better over the other? And, you start to kind of go down the rabbit hole of, well, concrete is inherently fireproofed, and the steel that I'm doing, I'm going to have to fireproof it. So now I'm coming in with a second trade and I'm making it more expensive and stuff like that. So you've got, this construction cost, which is, but also a sustainability, because you're looking at these overall costs and expenditures and the life cycle of just the overall maintenance of it, the overall construction of it, all of these other things. So you can start to balance out, well, there are a lot of inherently sustainable, and I know it sounds weird to say it out, like this, but there are inherently sustainable factors in concrete construction that you can still do a sustainable building with concrete construction, or you can say, okay, the reason why I'm doing this. So I guess I'm kind of arguing both of my minds.
The thing that I keep coming back to on this is typically, and I'm not there, right? I don't know what the professor's real motive here is to continually go back to more conventional construction methods. I don't know the lack of the true depth of the lack of knowledge about sustainability and all these things. But on one level, like I always treated my professor like a collaborator on the project. And I get it. Sometimes that just doesn't work, right? Sometimes you just want to go in a completely different direction. Maybe there are small compromises, to use her term, that she could use to build a stronger partnership. Because when it comes to game day, when you're actually giving the design presentation in front of a jury, it's good to have somebody on your side, right, when you're defending your project. Now, that's not always possible. Sometimes the jury will totally be on your side and your professor will not. And I've seen it many times where the professor switches sides because they want to look good in front of a jury of peers. Maybe they flop right in front of them. I've seen that happen before. But at the same time, like, you have to follow what you truly believe. So if you really believe that your project is about something that somebody like your professor doesn't believe it's about, I kind of feel like you have to fight for that. And so I honestly feel like you really have to listen to them. You can't just dismiss what they're saying. There probably are some valid points in there, but if it totally goes against what you're trying to do, then it's okay. And it's even okay for you to communicate that and say, even in your presentation, leading up on the process, because your presentation is not just the final outcome. It's how you got there and what you went through in the research that you did and how what you found was this. And you don't know if it's right, but you decided that it was the right thing to do for this project. Again, we're talking about, this is not a real building. There's no life or death scenario here. And in the very end, it's just a grade, right? So, I mean, really, I think if you really follow your heart and your passion here, and even if it is against what you're being told, and you can communicate that and you can say why you went in a different direction, that is totally valid stuff. And I think a jury typically will applaud you for that, or at least understand why you did it and give you some good feedback based on that.
Yeah.
But then I also think when you think about some of the people that this particular topic makes me think of, like Nader Khalili of CalEarth, who came up with his own sustainability related systems to build structures with indigenous materials like concrete from where he's from, which is Iran. I mean, or you think about Paolo Soleri out at Arcosanti, where he bought a plot of land out in the middle of nowhere so that he could pursue his sustainable architecture with his vision. I mean, these unconventional solutions are not born out of following everybody else's convention. And I don't think that, I mean, what many people would consider to be geniuses when it comes to design. I mean, yes, they're eccentric people, maybe they're a little bit isolationist, but still, like, they did their own thing and they're world renowned for it. So I don't know that, like, it makes any sense to try to say you should fit this mold that they're laying out for you.
Well, you know, I also often think back to that studio I was telling you about, where, you know, we started off very confrontational, and kind of through the whole thing, you know, I always often wonder, all right, so maybe he came in with his little declaration of throwing the gauntlet down, and it's just like, I only give B's, I never give A's, you know, that's the highest grade I give. And maybe if I would have, you know, worked harder and been less confrontational, that, you know, maybe I would have been the first one that he gave an A to, because, you know, it's like, hey, you know, this guy's really trying to, you know, work to show me something.
Think of it more of a challenge rather than a personal kind of a thing. Yeah,
exactly. But, you know, I was so personally offended by the thing. It's just like, look, you know, I don't care how hard you work, you know, you're not going to get rewarded for it. And you're like, all right, fine. Well, then it's going to work just the opposite for you, because I'm going to work less, and I'm going to do bare minimum stuff.
I've totally felt like that too. Somebody says you're not working fast enough, then I work even slower, right?
You're like, oh, really? Not working fast enough?
Yeah, but at that point, you're just trying to, like, prove a point, right? It's not,
yeah,
like you're not living up to that challenge, right? You're not. You're like, oh yeah, well, I'll show you, and not in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, I also go back to thinking about what Neil said, and I kind of agree completely with learning. So the only way that we have been able to like advance things is by understanding the way we used to do things, or the way that we currently do things. So in getting a mastery of them to then develop better ways to do those things. And so, you know, maybe, and this is where, you know, I can start to argue, you know, the other point of like, well, you know, maybe going back and actually doing a project that is more conventionally bent, and, you know, doing all of these conventional construction techniques so that you can learn and understand what the conventional construction techniques are, and how you're going to be dealing with contractors in the field with those conventional construction techniques. Then you can say, okay, I understand where you guys are coming from, but let me tell you some of, you know, through my research and understanding of, you know, these sustainable practices, what we can do better to make what you guys normally do just that much better, that more environmentally friendly, that more, you know, contributing to the life cycle costing and all of that, so that, you know, you can, you know, become a leader in, you know, taking the conventional construction techniques that much further, you know. So I mean, there's the opportunity to argue this in so many different ways.
Agreed. I can agree with that too, and I also think that, like, this isn't a math equation. This is architecture. There's not one right answer here. So when it comes to your project and what you're doing with it, like, all people can do is give input and try to steer you in a direction, but there is not like one answer that everybody's shooting for. We talked about before on the podcast, if you give everybody the same project, we've seen this in school time and time again, everybody has a different solution every time.
Yeah.
And that's how it'll always be. And now that we operate in the real world, you know, air quotes there, when I design a building that gets built, I still think about that. I still think of how if somebody else designed this building, it wouldn't look like this when I'm walking through it.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, that's what makes this so interesting to me, right? Because it is decision after decision, and every decision is based on previous chain of decisions that could have gone so many different ways. And all you had to do was swap out one variable. It could be a person. It could be how they felt that day. It could be who was at the meeting. It could be where the meeting happened. It could be so many things, right? That would change the direction. Like Cormac, you said, you're going with steel instead of concrete for this building that you're working on. It would be different if it was concrete. It's not like those two things are equally interchangeable. They're not. They're different. And so, again, like I just want to reiterate that it's frustrating to go through this experience. That's probably a good thing. That means you're learning. But it also, there is no like right answer here. And so, I mean, we're coming at this from many different angles, but there's not like a perfect end project that you're shooting for. The whole thing is a process, and it's about that process.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example about this current project. I was supposed to be on the project, early in, conceptual design, I guess. But I was working on another project, and it kind of kept dragging on. The, construction documents delivery date kept pushing out further and further and further. And so the project got started. Teams were being built. I eventually was coming onto the team, but up until that time, the building had been designed. The building had been costed out as with conceptual design and conceptual cost estimating. Everything was trending towards concrete. And no one was asking the question, why are we building in concrete? I mean, and when I got on board, I started looking at it and analyzing, we've got all of these tricky little cantilevers and things like that. And we were trying to hover over the top of and cantilever over existing utility tunnels and adjacent buildings that have basements that are immediately under the footprint of our building and stuff like that. And I kept going back and looking at it and saying, I'm not sure that this really makes sense for this particular construction method. And it was really only me getting on board and saying, hey, well, why aren't we doing it in steel? And everybody's like, I don't know why we're not doing it in steel.
Challenging the status quo. What? But this is how we always do it.
Well, that's it. They're like, in Baltimore, we build in concrete. I'm like, why? I mean, I was like, as a cost saving method in a lot of the K through 12 stuff, and I sort of brought my K through 12 cost savings, hat on and said, we do a lot of things out of steel because of the flexibility of what we can do with it. I mean, yeah, concrete's, a lot of times tends to be a lot cheaper but you got all this flexibility and stuff. And so where I'm going is that, I guess, it was, you're right. I mean, everybody's going to come up with a different solution and a different problem to address something. And so I don't know if we've even remotely touched on whether or not she like entrench in and kind of fight the fight, and I would say fight the good fight, or I'm going to phrase it as giving in and just kind of going with the more conventional. But I don't even necessarily feel like it's giving in. I think it's maybe taking a different tact on the way that she approaches this is her sustainability. It's like, okay, like I said earlier, it's all right, here's the way you guys do it. Well, here's my overlay of this sustainability. Here's how I can do it better.
I would also say that it's important to maybe understand where and maybe why the professor is coming from this direction and pushing you in this direction. We cannot tell from the email if that is obvious or not. And so, think of this as another design problem. Come at it from, this is your client, and you're trying to understand, what they're trying to ask you to do. And we oftentimes have said on this show, everything's a design problem. Treat this as another design problem and try and understand maybe where the professor's coming from, why they're making you do this, or why they want you to do it this way. And maybe that'll give you some clues as to what you should do, right? It's not necessarily a black and white. Should I just, how did you say it here in the email? Just giving up and compromising, I think was the word you used. Yes, thank you. And so in this case, try and understand that, and then see what you can make out of that. Use it as another design challenge here. Ultimately, maybe there is no reason. Maybe you have one professor who's just being a jerk, and hopefully it's only a quarter or a semester long, and you just move on, and the next professor will be better or different, right? It doesn't seem like this is although this is the final project you're working on, so I guess in that case it doesn't matter. But then I would go back. I would say for most people, if you're in the middle of school or something, it just go with it, do the best you can, and do what Evan said earlier. And Cormac, you said as well, you're paying for this. Get what you want out of it, and if you're not getting that, then there's the next quarter, or maybe there's another advisor you can go speak to try and get something out of that quarter that you're currently in, or semester you may be in. In your case, because this is your final project, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Not too many people ask you what your grades are in school when you get out. It's more like, or I don't think I've ever asked anyone in a job interview, what grade did you get on your final project?
Did you graduate? That's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. You graduated, great. Show me the imagery from your final project and what you learned from that and what you did. Nobody's going to care what grade you got. And so that's hopefully that's true. And I would say push the limits of what you are trying to learn. If your passion is sustainability and using alternative materials than what is normal, go for it. Go learn that. You will probably find a firm out there that is interested in that, and you can use that to get a job.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And, like I said, I could argue, all sides of this, but, my internal gut feeling is, fight the power, damn the man.
Again, I go back to not playing it safe and not just worrying about what the checklist of things that you have to complete for this project are. Rather, design the project that you really believe needs to be the project, and show the pieces of that will tell the story of what you need to say. Back it up with research. Back it up with real reasons why, not just because you felt like it or right. Because that's the way the wind blew that day, right? It's all about data. And if you come across with that passion when you're presenting it, the passion for architecture and the passion for this project, you're definitely gonna have a great conversation that day. There's never gonna be a dull moment there, and you're gonna be able to get some good feedback. And nobody gets to tell you that you don't get to make this project even better when it goes in your portfolio. Like, if you get great feedback that day, maybe you can incorporate it, put it in that portfolio so that it's even better. That's really what the opportunity is at a final jury, is to present your work, get good feedback, and potentially make that project even better. Take that good idea and make it a great idea. I mean, you're going to have some really good minds there. Decide what you want to get out of that final jury. I typically tell people not to talk about what they didn't do or what they did badly. Talk about the good points, because you're presenting your work that hopefully there's some passion behind. I have no doubt that there's passion behind this, but you definitely want to figure out what you can use that jury for that day, and steer the conversation in that direction so that you get even more out of this project. And that's hard when you're tired and you're worn out from doing this up to the last minute, but it is a missed opportunity if you don't take advantage of that situation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, actually you bring up a good point, because I was going to say, but you said it far more eloquently than I'm about to say. But if you are going to buck the system and you're going to fight, I wouldn't say fight the professor, but if you have to fight him, go for it. You should. um, but if you're gonna stick to your guns and you're gonna do your sustainable project, and honestly, everything is telling me to tell you, do it. Do exactly what you want to do. Just make sure that, as Evan said, you're able to bring all of the data in and present it confidently, competently, and with passion. No one's going to fault you for it. No one's going to say, "Hey, this was a bad idea," or "God, I really wish that you would have done this." Conventional construction, concrete construction and stuff. They're going to say, all right, here's somebody who's really passionate about what they did. They did the research, they backed it all up, and they did a great job. But what you just kind of said, kind of triggered the last time I sat in on a jury, and almost everybody came into that jury starting to talk about all of the negatives about the project before they got to the positives. And it was just, I sat there kind of like churning in my chair, like, I want to hear what you got out of it, not what it's like why you struggle or what you hated about it or something like that. Just get to the meat of the joy of the project and go with that.
That's it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Don't start off with what you didn't do.
Yes.
Never do that, right?
Yes.
I mean,
architect fails right there.
Yeah, another architect fails.
All right, I think we talked this one to death, and hopefully we gave something to go off there. I know it's a high stress time, but take a deep breath and finish strong, because I mean it sounds like the passion's there, and that you're made to be an architect. So you'll make it through this for sure.
Coming from somebody who's going through a very stressful time right now, trying to wear multiple hats, and in less than 2 weeks this will all be over, or just starting. I'm not sure yet. Hopefully just starting. Try and have some fun with it. Yes, everything could be pretty stressful, but realize you're at a point in your life right now where you're finishing your schooling. You're going to finish this off. Enjoy it, because this part of your life doesn't happen again. And so try and enjoy it, because it's not as bad as you think. And you're going to look back on this experience learning a lot from it. So as Evan said earlier, have a goal in mind for what you want to get out of the project, what you want to get out of that final jury crit, and where that is going to take you in your career.
Yeah, this is a stepping stone for sure.
This is a stepping stone. Yeah. And it's really hard to see that sometimes, especially when you're in school, and it's hard to look forward. But look forward, see where this is going to take you, because quite honestly, your final project is one where that's really the opening statement for you when you go looking for a job. It's like, this is what I'm passionate about, and this is why I want to work here, and this is what I've done to deserve working here. And that's what this project really is for. It's not just to please your professor or your classmates or any. Think forward of what this project is really meant to be as your stepping stone to what you're passionate about and where you want to go in the future of your career.
The way I look at it here, also, she's to me setting the tone right for the rest of her life in this profession, because she's already out there questioning the status quo, which is what we're built to do. She's looking at, okay, this is how you do it, but this is a good way to do it better. And this is exactly where we're going in this profession. We're trying to make things better. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprints. We're trying to build better buildings and things like that. So sticking to your guns and going with what you feel is right is going to go a long way in this career for the rest of your career. So keep going.
Thanks, Hyla, for the question. It was a good discussion. I think a lot of people need to hear that. And again, I think it applies to the professional out there as well, right? Not just the student.
Yeah.
There's lots of professionals dealing with stuff like this all the time. And in every instance here along the timeline is just something that is going to be that stepping stone for that next thing that you do. So like Neil said, find joy somewhere in it and move through it, move on, and use that information for the next decision. I mean, it's all building towards the next thing. And the past doesn't exist, right? The past is the past. You only have right now. So take advantage of it.
All right, so let's take this one out and remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by Arcat and Hager Companies. The music is by System Kid. Subscribe to Archispeak on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or listen directly from our site at archispeakpodcast.com. You can follow the show on social media via Twitter and Facebook, and links to each of those can be found on the site. Thanks for listening, everyone, and keep those questions coming. They've been feeding us along pretty good here this late fall, and remind everyone to stay subscribed.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Drawing straws and pails, me hard. I'm caught in a phone booth on the beach. You reach for your gun. Do I watch or run, or will someone call 911? Please, you were everything I wanted. Beat your babies for needing you. Still your hunger to conceive. A brand new pup might cuddle up, but he won't be enough. Your greed. I'm caught in a phone booth on the beach. You reach for your gun. Do I watch or run, or will someone call 911? Please, you were everything they needed and more. Oh, and everything was magic, but more went overboard. I hate the way that you lied to me. Still, I love you anyway. Because you tell me every little thing's gonna be